Chi arriva a Tecla poco vede della città. Dietro gli steccati di tavole, i ripari di tela di sacco, le impalcature, i ponti di legno sospesi a funi o sostenuti da cavalletti. E la domanda è: perché la costruzione di Tecla continua così a lungo? Gli abitanti, senza smettere di issare secchi, di calare fili a piombo, di muovere in su e in giù lunghi pennelli. Perché non cominci la distruzione? Rispondono. E richiesti se temono che appena tolte le impalcature la città cominci a sgretolarsi e andare in pezzi. Soggiungono in fretta sottovoce: non soltanto la città. Se insoddisfatto delle risposte, qualcuno applica l'occhio alla fessura di una staccionata. Vede gru che tirano altre gru, incastellature che rivestono altre incastellature, travi che puntellano altre travi. Che senso ha il vostro costruire, dunque? Qual è il fine di una città in costruzione se non una città? Dov'è il piano che seguite, il progetto? Te lo mostreremo appena terminata la giornata. Ora non possiamo interrompere, rispondono. Il lavoro cessa al tramonto. Scende la notte sul cantiere. È una notte stellata. Ecco il progetto, dicono.
Good morning. This is a problem of affordance, yes? So adjusting device to human needs. Before I go any further, I would like to ask you how many of you have read the book of Italo Calvino? 1, 2, 3. Okay, is it obligatory to read this book in Italian high school? Or no? Okay. Okay, so my outlook on the problem of cities is slightly different. I think I'm going to speak from different perspective, and of course my perspective is shaped by what I do in everyday life. I'm going to speak about cities and human needs, and my name is Natalia Olszewska. I work for Human Metrics Lab, which is part of HUME, Science Inform Urban and Architecture Design Studio, created by Itai Palti. Thank you, Itai. Now, before I go any further, I want to say that I think cities are a very interesting subject because on one hand, they are solid, they are something visible. We can all see buildings, streets, parks, but at the same time, they have many different hidden dimensions. They are ephemeral. This is Jane Jacobs. Jane Jacobs is an American but somehow she still is. She was an American activist and journalist, and she fought for a presence of human dimension in American cities in the last century. So she's a legend, and her spirit, in a way, is going to guide me through this presentation. Just briefly about myself and my background. So I'm a medic, I studied medicine, I care about people. I've been working with people in hospitals for more than a decade. And also I have a degree in neuroscience, brain and mind sciences, and neuroscience applied to architecture. And why this strange combination? I think what happened back in 2004, I had a chance to go to Venice to see Architectural Biennale. I was still a medical student at that time. And I saw the exhibition in the presence of my friend, architect, and it made such a huge impression on me that I thought that later in my life I would like to merge somehow human physiology, neuroscience, and architecture, urban design. I would like to work with architects. So cities are also a very important subject because they are a global habitat. And it's been prognosed by PricewaterhouseCoopers, global consultancy company, that by 2050, the population of cities will have increased by 72%. So in a way, it's an increasing problem. We have to deal with increasing urbanization problem. Now, this same company has published recently this report, which somehow I found on the internet, and I thought, interesting. The report speaks about the future of work, but I think workspace reflects also somehow social changes, and it's also linked with cities. So in this report, there are 4 different scenarios of workforce in the future, in close future, 11 years. So there is a yellow world in which humans come first. There is a green world in which companies care about environment, so it's sustainable world. There is a red world where innovation rules, and there is a blue world where corporate is king. Now, why am I talking about all this? Cities shape our minds, they shape our identities, they shape our memories, desires, they can give us hope for future, they can inspire us. On the contrary, they can oppress us, they can deprive us of basic human needs, of privacy, of hope, they can alienate us. Of course, nothing is black and white, but I fear that if we don't speak enough about human dimension in general, but also in the context of discussion on future cities, conscious cities, we will end up in the world where innovation rules. And personally, I would like to live in a sustainable world where we care about nature, companies care about nature, and the world where humans come first. So, cities, architecture have a great potential, and I think we still don't understand this potential. I hope we'll make some progress in the future decades. But I think a good example of very positive influence of city on human mind is the story of Jonas Salk. So Jonas Salk was an American scientist, virologist, and he's invented a vaccine against polio. And I think it was back in the 60s, he happened to spend a few weeks in Assisi, and he was working extensively on the vaccine. And upon his arrival to Pittsburgh, to his laboratory, what happened? A breakthrough in his research. And later on, Salk claimed that it was contemplative architecture of Assisi which helped him to invent the vaccine. He was so much under impression of what happened that later on he inspired the foundation of Academy of Neuroscience for Architecture. So that was positive example. Negative example, I think a symbolic example of devastation of human aspects within the city is the project called Pruitt Ego Project. It was a social housing project created in St. Louis in States back in the 50s of the past century, and it was demolished 3 decades later. And it still remains a symbol of social, racial, and architectural tensions present in American cities in the past century. Oh, before I go any further, I just would like us to start to appreciate that cities shape everything in our lives for people who live in cities, our mind, memories, desires, but I think they are also a projection of values of different groups, individuals, social, other groups which make decisions. And now let's look at what values are present in the mainstream thinking about cities at the moment. I think there are at least 3 different lenses. So the first lens is a lens of high tech. The second lens is the lens of economy. We all want to capitalize the potential which cities bring. And the third lens is a lens of efficiency. For example, We could talk about the project of Carlo Ratti Associati, very progressive architectural architecture studio. They created an amazing project, Fondazione Agnelli in Torino. And as you can even see on the image, what they did, they created inside the building a kind of environmental bubble. So people, users of the building, can adapt temperature and the lighting level to their needs. And the underlying philosophy of this project is that this is a frictionless building where people can create and interactions between people are somehow fostered. Maybe. But I would argue that creativity is sometimes about problem solving. And I know a lot of stories of scientists who thrived in their lives on problem solving in everyday situations. So whenever something didn't work, they just, wanted to fix it. And this is how they coined different theories. And this is how they, for example, Frank Aufner invented different devices, for example, ECG, portable ECG. So, we've heard different stories of the use of artificial intelligence today in a great context, in a great way, how we can optimize navigation in the buildings, create different algorithms in the cities, how we can create better public spaces and so on. And this is fantastic. I'm not against it. But at the same time, I just want to stress the fact that we start to live in very different reality, because I'm a humanist. I don't fear technology, but at the same time, I think I still want to be responsible for my life, for my choices. So I make choices based on emotions, which are biological algorithms, which have evolved over centuries, over thousands of years, right? They are common for human species. But today, in more and more situations, we make decisions based on computer algorithms. And I like what Harari writes in his books. Do you know this guy? Yuval Harari? Sometimes, yes? Okay, nice. So he says we don't live in the world of humanism anymore. We live in the world of dataism. So, of course, data poses many different ethical problems, which I'm not going to discuss today. I would bore you to death. So, we know that we live in economies which thrive on data. This is a new kind of fuel, but we can't forget about the fact that there is this vastness of data, and very often we've got a problem with interpretation of data. If we want to live in, because this is the subject of today's conference, shaping conscious cities. So I think if we want to live in conscious buildings, in conscious cities, we need to make sure that data is always put in the right context. It's like human empathy, right? We empathize with others. What does it mean? We collect some information from our environment about others' people's behavior. We process it, we put it into certain context, and then we generate adequate response. This is what buildings should be able to do. So to summarize this part of the presentation, somehow I agree with Federico Caprotti, who published a very interesting article in Nature last year. And he says that smart urbanism is vaguely defined, and it's mainly a set of approaches which aim to make the city more efficient and economically successful through use of different digital technologies and networks. But what it misses? Human dimension. In many cases, not always, as we saw today and we heard. So I think cities should be great place to live, and if they are meant to be great places to live, we always need to consider human needs. So now I would like to maybe think about some examples in which we consider human needs. And there are some architects and urban designers who get inspired by a pyramid of Maslow, which was created back in 40s of the past century. And Maslow did something very important because he started to speak about positive dimension of mental health. And if we put his hierarchy of human needs within the context of the city, we've got different levels. So at the very base, we can talk about infrastructure within the city. So we're talking about shelters, food, access to water. The second level is a level of security. So we can talk about police, fire services on the most basic level. Then something we all need, sense of belonging. So there's a problem of social connectivity within the cities. Cities should provide us with opportunities to connect with others. Then we've got a level of personal growth. So city should be a place where we can all learn. Self-esteem, which is self-esteem of the city or related to the city. So we all know examples of people, or even in our cases, we are very proud of being inhabitant of Venice or Berlin or Tel Aviv, because there are super startups hubs, or there are super parks and so on. And then on the highest level, there's a level of self-actualization. So for example, opportunities for inhabitants of the cities to take responsibility, right? Of course, all these human needs need always to be inserted into certain context. So human needs should be place-specific and geography-specific. And what works in Johannesburg doesn't need to work in Rome. The other problem of the context is the fact that in order to progress along the pyramid of human needs, the basic needs need to be met. So the lower level of the needs need to be met in order for higher needs to be realized. That would explain why, for example, people who live in the places where there's no shelter or no access to food and water don't care about democracy, because democracy is a self-esteem need. But now, getting to meritum of discussion. So how to translate insights emerging from neuroscience into guidelines for coding healthy and democratic architecture and urban design? This is one of the questions of this conference. So I would propose that we start redefining Maslow's pyramid, because we're talking about something, a concept which was created more than 7 decades ago, and I think the idea is still valid, but maybe we need to take more inspiration from neuroscience research, neuroscience findings. So redefining this pyramid, we could argue that, okay, at the base of the pyramid, we always have food. Humans need calories. They need ample hydration. They need natural lights, also in the buildings, because natural light entrains circadian biological rhythms. They need clear air. Then they need sleep, 6-9 hours of sleep, and this is not a trivial problem in urban context. I think there's a lot of people who can't get 6-9 hours of sleep. Without sleep, we can't learn, we can't get over past emotional pain. We need movement, and cities also should provide opportunities to walk, to move, to exercise. Movement is very important, also because it entrains biological cycles. We need others, we need touch, it affects the level of oxytocin, very important hormone. We need novelty, opportunities to learn. These opportunities affect, the vastness of these opportunities can bring the dopamine level up. Ideally, buildings and cities give us conditions, create conditions for our optimal cognitive emotional state. And then at the very, very peak of this pyramid, I inserted nature. Maybe it could be also inserted on other levels, but I thought nature is beauty. We're talking about both natural and artificial beauty. Beauty inspires awe. Awe is important emotion. We can transcend thanks to awe. So cities shape desires, identities, memories, and we can't exclude affect from cities. Now a little bit of poesy. poetry. So, Diomira, a city with 60 silver domes, bronze statues of all the gods, streets paved with slit, a crystal theater, a golden cock that crows each morning on a tower. All these beauties will already be familiar to the visitor, who has seen them also in other cities. But the special quality of this city for the man who arrives there on a September evening, when the days are growing shorter and the multicolored lamps are lighted all at once at the doors of the food stalls, and from a terrace a woman's voice cries, is that he feels envy towards those who now believe they have once before lived an evening identical to this, and who think they were happy that time. Cities and desires. So, I'm slowly summarizing. I've been talking about all these things because human needs are something related to the problem of resilience. And so we've heard a lot. I've heard, also thanks to my work, maybe not a lot, a little bit about resilient cities. Resilient cities have capacity of individuals, communities, institutions, businesses, different groups, to survive, adapt, and grow no matter what happens in the city, what kind of chronic stresses there are present. On an individual level, resilience is our ability to bounce back from adversity. And resilient cities are resilient people. So we always need to bear in mind this positive dimension of mental health when we create cities. So architects, urbanists, and city coders are healthcare professionals, as Tolulahu Oni, urban epidemiologist from University of Cambridge, says. Now, I would argue that in today's reality, most decisions, as Anat was also explaining, are done in top-down way, right? So many people, like you were saying, that in City Hall in New York, people meet and somehow decisions are made. And I just want to come back to Jane Jacobs, who we spoke about at the very beginning of the presentation. She said that cities have the capability of providing something for everybody only because and only when they are created by everybody. So at that point, I don't want to be pessimistic about technology, and I would wish that new technologies, IA, etc., help us to create cities in bottom-up way, cities which consider citizens' voice and consider human needs. Now, just one more aspect. That means that every coder, every architect, every urban designer, whoever creates design city, deals also with many hidden ephemeral geographies. Identity of people, right? Because identity of people very often is based on decision to live here, not live there. And these decisions, human decisions, are also in a way imperfect because they are based on imagination and so on. But these human geographies need to be considered when we change environments. And just to finish with quotation of Callan. Callan was a famous British architect, and he used to say that under the art of architecture, there is an art of relationships. So different elements of the city, of architectural creation, building, park, streets, and people who are actors in the city need to be merged in a special way, in a way that drama, emotions get released. We're talking about cities which can inspire, and I wish for all of us that we have opportunity to live in cities like this. Thank you very much.